Hey YouTube, Pokemon Trainer Harry Ghost here, and today I am bringing a very fun Furfrou team. Furfrou is a very interesting Pokemon because it does get the ability Fur Coat, which doubles its defense stat. So even though Furfrou doesn't have the highest base defense, instead it its lowest base stat is indeed its defense. It is definitely a design choice because Fur Coat on Furfrou does allow it to live physical hits decently well. So yeah, we are running leftovers Furfrou with substitute, Meganiumite Meganium, Bright Powder Farigera with Ally Switch, Focus Sash Pelipper, Citrus Berry Arcanine, and White Hub Aegislash. So let's just jump right into the battles. So my first opponent, Lure 95, is running a Mega Floet team, and they do have an Umbreon which is very cool. And yeah, as we can see, they are an Umbreon admirer, which as you'll see in this battle, their Umbreon does give me some issues. My opponent leads off with Incineroar and Talonflame as I lead off with my Meganium and my Pelipper. Now on the first turn, I go for Protect with my Pelipper because there is no reason for me to take Fake Out damage and break my Focus Sash, and have my Focus Sash broken is the better way of saying it. And I switch out my Meganium because I do not want to be taking super effective Gale Wings boosted super effective flying type attack. So I switch out my Meganium into my Furfrou, which Furfrou is able to take this stab acrobatics with relative ease. I mean, Furfrou doesn't have the highest base defense stat, but Fur Coat does allow it to be able to take reduced damage in that department. On the second turn, I click Thunder Wave into my opponent's Incineroar slot as my opponent clicks Tailwind and clicks Parting Shot with their Incineroar, trying to reduce my stab water type damage. But Pelipper in the rain with Stab Other Ball is so powerful, as they do bring in their Umbreon switching out their Incineroar. But as I was saying, Stab Other Ball, Pelipper is so powerful that it is able to one-shot Talonflame. I mean, Talonflame is not the most defensive Pokemon in the world, but yeah, getting rid of Talonflame on the turn 3 is very, or turn 2 is very helpful for me because that means no more Tailwind support on my opponent's side, and as I can still click Tailwind on my Pelipper. I click Thunder Wave into my opponent's Incineroar slot as Umbreon switches in, and thankfully they are not synchronized Umbreon, they are running Inner Focus Umbreon because Inner Focus is common in doubles to prevent Fake Out Flinch. This turn I click Substitute because I am running Last Resort Furfrou. I need to be able to click each and every move before I am able to click my Stab normal type attack. My opponent clicks Fake Out into my Furfrou, crits me as I do click Stab Other Ball because I do outspeed their Umbreon in even though they have Tailwind set up, Thunder Wave does allow me to outspeed their Umbreon with my Weather Ball, as thanks to the, even though Paralysis has been nerfed, but Para Gods, that's 12.5, not 25% chance anymore, this 12.5% chance does prevent this Umbreon from moving. This turn I click Tailwind and I click Substitute because as I said, I want to be able to click all of my moves other than Last Resort at least once so that I can unlock my damage dealing normal type move, which probably Protect and Double Edge or even Facade are better than Last Resort, but we do not run optimal movesets on this channel if you couldn't tell by now. I click Tailwind with my Pelipper, and even though I do not think Umbreon and Incineroar would have outsped my Furfrou and Pelipper even without this Tailwind, but Tailwind does help against this Mega Floet which my opponent has sent out. My opponent's Umbreon does click Toxic into my Pelipper, which puts my Pelipper on a timer. Now this turn, this Umbreon is indeed a threat. It has Even though it has not done much, but Umbreon is very very bulky, and because my opponent has brought out their Floet, they are most likely going to Mega Evolve their Floet, so that means I can make use of Fairy Aura, my opponent's Fairy Aura, to deal increased Fairy type damage from my own Mega Meganium. I click Thunder Wave into the opponent's Floet, trying to slow it down a bit, even though we do still outspeed it because of the Tail Whip. Maybe Crunch would have been better than Thunder Wave because I do have Tailwind, but yeah, as I said, Thunder Wave is for when Pelipper goes on, because Pelipper is not the most bulkiest Pokemon either, so Thunder Wave does help in that regard, as you'll see later on in the battle. My opponent's Tailwind peters out as I now there is my opponent didn't Mega Evolve with their Floet last turn, so maybe they are not Mega Floet as I was expecting, but we do click the Mega button with my own Meganium, as Meganium does Mega Evolve into Mega Meganium, which to threaten out this Umbreon, which has not taken any damage so far, as my opponent is indeed Mega Floet, which it was kind of obvious because they do not have any other Mega Pokemon and they just forgot to click the Mega button last turn. Fairy Aura does activate. They do click Protect with their Floet. I click Baby Doll Eyes with my Furfrou because this is the last move which I have to click before I unlock my Stab Last Resort. Dazzling Gleam, Fairy Aura boosted, does so much damage to this Umbreon. I would have hoped and wished it brought it down lower, but unfortunately it does not. It only brings it down to 37% health. My opponent's Umbreon clicks Snarl, which is a way to bypass my Furfrou substitute, but Snarl from Umbreon is not going to deal the most amount of damage to my Furfrou either way, even with Stab. Now I have unlocked my last resort, and even though I am at -1 attack, Floet does not have the Mega Floet does not have the highest base defense, so I mean Furfrou doesn't have the highest base attack either, but I still will be able to chunk down this Mega Floet way harder with my physical last resort than with my special Dazzling Gleam. Stab Last Resort does so much damage, but that is because of a critical hit. As unfortunately for me, my opponent's Umbreon does live -1 Dazzling Gleam at very low sliver of health. My opponent's Mega Floet knocks out my Mega Meganium with Moonblood, which is very unfortunate for me, as they do click Moonlight, which is this Umbreon. As I said, they are an Umbreon admirer for a reason, because they clearly Umbreon is such a bulky Pokemon and it is very difficult to take down, so I can see how they are able to make it work and win battles with Umbreon. I switch in my Pelipper this turn because I know that I'll be able to deal with this Umbreon with because Stab Other Ball from Pelipper hits extremely hard. I click Stab Other Ball into my opponent's Umbreon and click Last Resort into my opponent's Mega Floet, because even if they try to protect or something at this low range of health, Mega Floet should be able to be KO'd by Last Resort. And even if they switch in Incineroar is at a low amount of health itself because of my Pelipper's Weather Ball in the beginning of the battle. I click Last Resort, but because of that -1 attack into my Furfrou, Umbreon is able to live, as Stab Snarl does bring Umbreon. I mean Umbreon, yeah, as I said, it is very low, but Stab Snarl at this low amount of health will not be able to save my opponent's Umbreon anymore. I click Last Resort into my opponent's Mega Floet this turn because they did protect last turn, so Last Resort is pretty free. And even if this send out Incineroar, as I said, one, I am immune to Intimidate because of Substitute, and two, even if they keep their Mega Floet in, I will be able to KO with Last Resort because of that prior crit which I got. Stab Other Ball is able to finish my opponent's Umbreon, and Last Resort is able to finish my opponent's Mega Floet. So yeah, down go both my opponents Umbreon and Mega Fluid this turn. As my opponent's last Pokemon is Incineroar, and unfortunately for Incineroar, there is a last resorting Furfrou behind a substitute and a water type in its face. So my opponent does bring out Incineroar, and yeah, seeing the writing on the wall, my opponent clicks the forfeit button. So yeah, we win. We are able to defeat Lure 95. Now my next opponent, Denku, is running another Mega Fluid team, though they could have potential Mega Delphox also. So yeah, this is one of those two dual Mega teams which are fairly common, but my opponent does lead off with their Fluid and Incineroar, as I do lead off with my Meganium and Furfrou. Now, yeah, as I am intimidated, which is fine, but this time, I mean, I could bring Pelipper to threaten out the Incineroar, but I do, instead, I decide to send out my AG Slash to threaten out this Mega Fluid, because, as I said, Mega Fluid is the main damage dealer. Incineroar can be dealt with later on with my Pelipper, but Mega Fluid is going to deal a lot of damage to my team, as other than my AG Slash, neither of Pelipper, Meganium or Furfrou can hit this Mega Fluid that hard. Dazzling Gleam, Fairy Aura boosted, does a decent amount of damage. I am max special defense Furfrou, so it doesn't deal as much damage because I'm hoping and letting Fur Coat be my defensive resistance, and that is why I'm max special defense Furfrou. I click Thunder Wave into my opponent's Incineroar because we are Brave Nature AG Slash. We will not be able to outspeed Incineroar otherwise. So Thunder Waving Incineroar was very important. Now this turn I expect my opponent's Mega Fluid to protect, and so predicting my opponent's Mega Fluid to protect, I protect with my own AG Slash because I do not want to be taking any super effective dark or fire type moves into my AG Slash. I click Thunder Wave into my opponent's Mega Fluid, even though I potentially could have clicked Substitute or Baby Doll Eyes or something, because as I said, I did predict my opponent's Mega Fluid to click Protect, but it is fine. Stab Iron Head is ready to attack this Mega Fluid. I click Substitute with my Furfrou this turn. So yeah, my opponent is making their move. And is taking a lot of time, which, as I always say, there is no reason for you to hesitate to take your time in making a move. There is an AG Slash threatening their opponents, their Mega, not their opponent is me. There is a stab super effective AG Slash threatening their Mega Pokemon. My opponent's Fluid goes for Calm Mind, trying to increase their damage so that they can muscle through my AG Slash. I click Substitute with my Furfrou because there is no reason for me not to do that, because even though Fluid does threaten not super effective but decent fairy type damage into my Furfrou, AG Slash will be able to deal with it, as Stab Iron Head brings Fluid down so low. Now this turn I click King Shield with my AG Slash because once again there is, in my Blade form I am extremely vulnerable even to resisted fairy type attack, so I need to get myself into my Shield form so that I can resist these fairy type attacks decently well. My opponent clicks Draining Kiss into my AG Slash, trying to recover some of their health, as I click Thunder Wave into my opponent's Corviknight, trying to slow it down in case they are Tailwind Corviknight and are able to outspeed my Mega Meganium in the future of the battle. They click Iron Defense with their Corby Knight, which is fine. They will not be able to touch my AG Slash with body presses, and they will not keep. And my opponent, my Meganium does threaten this Corby Knight with Mega Soul boosted Weather Ball. I click Baby Doll Eyes into my opponent's Mega Floet because I need to click all my moves at least once, and if I click Baby Doll Eyes into my opponent's Corby Knight, they most likely have Mirror Armor, so I will end up reducing my own attack. So that is why I went for Baby Doll Eyes into my opponent's Mega Floet slot instead. They try to regain their health with Draining Kiss, but resisted Draining Kiss into my AG Slash does not let them recover enough health to let them live this Iron Head. So down goes my opponent's Mega Floet to my AG Slash's Iron Head, as Body Press does break my substitute. Now this turn my opponent sends in their Basculegion to threaten out my AG Slash, which, as I said, my opponent's Corby Knight is basically rendered useless versus my AG Slash, and so that is why they send out their Basculegion to try to deal with my AG Slash. But predicting my AG Slash to go for King Shield this turn, as I said, there is no reason for me to not go for King Shield. If they try to attack me, they will lose their attack. They will lose their attack by -1 by one stage. So predicting my King Shield, they go for Wave Crash into my Furfrou. But Furfrou with Fur Coat is so good that it is able to live. And I go for Thunder Wave into my opponent's Basculegion, as my opponent goes for another Iron Defense, trying to set up for the late game, because they must be thinking that I only have Steel and Stab and Ghost Type moves, but I do have Sacred Sword as well to deal with this Corby Knight. My opponent's Basculegion has been slowed down due to the Thunder Wave, so I do go for substitute this turn, and hoping, because I am Brave Mr. AG Slash, I might not be able to outspeed this Basculegion that well if it is Choice Scar Basculegion, but it is not Choice Scar Basculegion, it is actually Focus Sash, so Thunder Wave Basculegion is slower than my AG Slash even with the Brave Nature, and down goes my opponent's Basculegion to stab Poltergeist. My opponent goes for Body Press once again, breaking my substitute on my Furfrou, but it is fine. My opponent's my Furfrou substitute breaks, but it is fine, as I said. I don't know why I'm repeating myself. So my opponent's last Pokemon is Incineroar, so which does intimidate me, but I do have White Hub, so I will be able to negate that Intimidate drop. And it is 2 Pokemon on my opponent's side versus all 4 of mine. I do have Pelipper to threaten this Incineroar with Stab Water type attacks, and I do go for King Shield this turn, because once again there is no reason for me to not go into my shield form. I switch in my Pelipper, activate Drizzle to set up the rain, go for King Shield, activate Stance Change to go into shield form, because if my opponent tries to go for Body Press or tries to attack my AG Slash or something, they will lose their attack by -1 stage, which I do not know if Mirror Armor reflects the -1 attack from King Shield back to AG Slash. I do not know that exactly, but we will see it in case that happens in this game, though I do need to research this, I think, outside of this video. My opponent's Incineroar does get paralyzed due to the Thunder Wave. Stab or Weather Ball is able to KO, one-hit KO my opponent's Incineroar, as Sacred Sword, even though it is not Stab, does do a decent amount of damage, does 26% damage to my opponent's Corby Knight. Plus 6 Body Press is able to 2-hit KO my Pelipper, but seeing the writing on the wall, they have an Corby Knight which cannot touch my AG slash, they do forfeit this battle. So yeah, we are able to defeat Battle Girl Denchu. My last opponent, Gaka Jing, is running a Mega Alakazam Mega Meowstic dual, once again another dual Mega team, which Mega Alakazam is obviously more offensive and more as like it is essentially better than Mega Meowstic in the offensive department, though Mega Meowstic is better on the defensive side in case you want to be defensive, if in case you want a defensive psychic type, defensive Mega Evolution psychic type, then your answer is Mega Meowstic. My opponent is able to bypass Armor Tail with Mold Breaker Tinkaton, goes for Fake Out into my Farigiraf. Farigiraf flinches, I go for Thunder Wave into my opponent's King Gambit, trying to slow it down and prevent it. Even though it is only 12.5% chance, Thunder Wave does, and if it is Thunder Wave does that, and if I am able to prevent my opponent from making their move, it is always helpful. My opponent goes for Swords Dance last turn and goes for Knock Off this turn, crits my opponent's Farigiraf, crits my Farigiraf. As I go for Substitute and set up Reflect, because my opponent's King Gambit did set up a Swords Dance last turn, so Reflect will help me out in that department. I go for Kowtow Cleave. My opponent goes for Kowtow Cleave into my Farigiraf. I don't know what am I mean, I keep misspeaking, but yeah, that is fine, I guess. But yeah, so my opponent is able to knock out my Farigiraf with Kowtow Cleave, as I do send in my Mega Meganium versus 2 Steel types. But yeah, I do need to knock out this King Gambit on my opponent's side, because King Gambit at +2 is extremely dangerous, and even though it is paralyzed, paralysis nerfs in this game are not the most advantageous in the paralysis spreader's favor. So my opponent tries to go for Sucker Punch, tries to break my substitute in case I went for an offensive attack, but my only offensive attack is Last Resort, so obviously it will fail. Weather Ball Mega Soul Boosted is able to one-shot my opponent's King Gambit, as my opponent Gigaton Hammer is not able to knock out my Mega Meganium because of the Reflect which I set up last turn. Thunder Wave into my opponent's Tinkaton to slow it down a little, and so that my opponent's, even though my Mega Meganium does outspeed my opponent's Tinkaton, Thunder Wave does allow my Furfrou to outspeed Tinkaton as well. In comes my opponent's Meowstic. Now, as I said, because my opponent does have Alakazam as well, I expected my opponent's Mega Evolution to be Alakazam and not my Meowstic, and not their Meowstic. My opponent switches out Tinkaton into their Alakazam, Abracadabra, which is a very kind of befitting name for Alakazam because it is part of that enchant. My opponent goes for Psychic Terrain with their Meowstic. Prankster Psychic Terrain to allow my opponent's Mega Alakazam, because I'm hoping it is Mega Alakazam, because yeah, there is no reason to be Mega Meowstic if you have Mega Alakazam as your offensive Mega Psychic type. But Prankster Thunder Wave does allow my opponent's Mega Alakazam to click Expanding Force with ease, because yeah, there is no more Psychic Surge Pokemon, so we do have to click manual Psychic Terrain in Pokemon Champions right now. Nasty Plot from my opponent's Mega Alakazam is extremely scary, because Mega Alakazam's Expanding Force will do a lot of damage even to resisted Pokemon like AG Slash. My opponent does indeed have Expanding Force on their Meowstic as well, which Psychic Terrain boosted Expanding Force is able to knock out my substitute. which that is why like maybe substitute was not the best play, because protect I would be able to, I would not essentially have to lose my health each turn to allow my Furfrou to live, but it is still fine because substitute does allow me to easily live any double targets into my Furfrou, which protect does not allow me to do. So yeah, it is kind of like a trade-off. Like if you want to be able to live with your Furfrou, any double target attacks you need substitute, otherwise protect is just better. My opponent goes for, my opponent tries to attack with their Mega Alakazam but gets paralyzed because of my Furfrou's Thunder Wave last turn. Because they couldn't trace King Shield with their Mega Alakazam, so because they couldn't trace Stance Chain with their Mega Alakazam, the only ability they can potentially trace is Fur Coat. So yeah, they do trace Fur Coat, which is very tragic because that does increase my opponent's Mega Alakazam's defense stats. So Iron Head does not even do more than half to my opponent's Mega Alakazam. So this turn I have to gamble with Poltergeist. Yeah, so first I decide to go in my Shields form with my Aegislash, because there is no reason for me to take +2 Nasty Plot, +2 Expanding Force with a Nasty Plot boosted. Expanding Force does so much damage, would have done so much damage had I not protected with my Aegislash and my Furfrou. So yeah, as you can see, substitute does allow me to live Expanding Force at only 25%, which otherwise would have most likely one-shot my Furfrou. As you can see, Meowstic's Expanding Force did so much damage, so +2 Mega Alakazam's Expanding Force would have most likely one-shot, even though I were not at full health, but it would have easily KO'd my Furfrou. So this is where substitute is a helpful move. I have no reason to not click substitute this turn because it does allow me to live my opponent's barrage of Psy Spam moves. I click substitute once again. Expanding Force +2 Expanding Force does so much damage to my Aegislash in shield form, which is resisted. So yeah, Alakazam is extremely broken with Psy Spam, 150 base speed, 175 base special attack. Thankfully my opponent's Meowstic. Meowstic does get paralyzed, fully paralyzed. Poltergeist is able to KO my opponent's Mega Alakazam, so my opponent's Psy Spam mode is down. Like they still have Meowstic, but Psy Terran also goes down. So yeah, my opponent's Psy Spam offensive pressure has reduced by a lot. In comes my opponent's Tinkaton once again. I click Baby Doll Eyes into my opponent's Tinkaton to lower its attack, because yeah, there is no reason, because there is no way I can click Baby Doll Eyes. Like potentially they do get double paralyzed, fully paralyzed, and then I'll be able to click Last Resort, but that is not the most likely with the Thunder Wave nerfs. So I click Baby Doll Eyes into my opponent's Tinkaton, trying to lower its offensive pressure. Expanding Force at this low range of health is able to KO my Furfrou. As I had predicted, my opponent is indeed dual Mega, as we do see the Meowsticite. Stab Poltergeist into my opponent's Meowstic is able to one-shot it, so down goes my opponent's last piece in the Psy Spam. Once again Thunder Wave comes through, as my opponent is unable to knock out my Aegislash with knockoff potentially. In comes my Mega Meganium, which does have Weather Ball, Mega Soul boosted, and Iron Head to finish off my opponent's Tinkaton. So yeah, as we saw, even with the Thunder Wave nerfs, Thunder Wave is like, it does bail you out, even though it has been, the fully paralyzed chance has been nerfed from 25 to 12.5, it still can be helpful. As we saw, like all three of my Pokemon got paralyzed at least once, which did allow me to win this battle. Weather Ball is able to one-shot my opponent's Tinkatan, and this, so we are able to win versus Ga Gaka Jing. So yeah, this was the battle showcasing Furfrou and Thunder Waves utility. So yeah, this was the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.